Welcome to Trauma Recovery Anonymous, the podcast. My name is Richard, and I am your host. I am a member of 12-Step Recovery, and I find it really helpful for myself and for many people I work with that it kind of gives them a way into a life beyond their wildest dreams. And I try to get, when I can, some people who are members of 12 Steps groups. And when I can't find people who are members of 12 Steps group, I find recovery coaches or doctors, whatever, to help people on their get over the threshold. And today, I want to introduce you to John Merkel, a recovery coach who is an advocate of AA and helps people get over that threshold. So, John, please, will you tell us a bit about yourself and where your humble beginnings came and where you are now?
Thank you, Richard. And I appreciate the invitation. I'm honored to be on your show. Richard, I have for a considerable amount of time been leading 12-step workshops, specifically one-day 12-step workshops to help the newly sober alcoholic get off to a great start. So that's where my experience comes from, close to 30 years of leading one-day workshops. And as a result of that, I have last year in 2025 published Sobriety Breakthrough, years of recovery progress in one day, as a way to put it out there to the world at large, helping the newly sober to get a great start. Glad to be here.
John, I love that. I remember I took a client, a member through the 12 Steps in one day recently, and some other members were shocked to see it happen and how easy and how effective it was. I was introduced to Clarence Snyder in my younger days, who did the 12 Steps in 2 days. My first sponsor, an Irishman, took me through the 12 Steps in 4 sessions. It would have been 4 days if I hadn't gone missing on day 3. But I love the idea of doing it in 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. Again, I remember someone saying to me, Bill and Bob, if they had waited for a year to do the steps or taken 3 months to do the first step, they wouldn't have got sober. That they needed to do the steps right there and then. And so I love the old timers. Wally P. wrote a book about how to do the 12 steps in 4 sessions. And there's a lot of the old timers believed in doing the 12 steps right there and then. And in the beginning, there was no big book. There was no 12 by 12 book. You just did the 12 steps like you would do it with a newcomer in 1 day. And I was thinking, this program has given me 38 years of sobriety. I'm married. I've got children. I've dealt with my trauma. And I realized that it's a wonderful design for living. I've heard it be described as a design for living. And I think your program of a one-day workshop would benefit greatly people with trauma to understand how they can let go of the past and focus on the present. And tell us a bit more about your one-day workshops, please.
Well, thank you, Richard. And I love the idea that you're reaching out to the world to help out with the important area of healing traumas. But it is a fabulous design for living. The 12-step program, I believe it's that AA has created, that Bill and Bob came out with the world's best program for helping alcoholics recover. What pains me is the tragedy that so many newly sober come into recovery and they plug in, they stop drinking, they start going to meetings, and they become a spectator. They're there, they take their body to a meeting, but too many, I mean, it's almost epidemic, the number of people who fail in AA, not because there's something wrong with AA, but because they don't get off to a great start. So my program is designed for the newly sober alcoholic who still has enough desperation that they're willing to do anything. See, that's an ideal moment. If you waste your early desperation, you may not get it. You may not have the type of experience that you only get by taking the 12 steps. You can read about it, hear about it, but it's the doing. So that's what my program is a way for that newly sober alcoholic to just grab a sharing partner. There's no need to wait. You can jump right in. That's what the program is about.
That's brilliant, John. John, I just want to share with the audience, you work with alcoholics, okay? And I get that completely. And your book is targeting getting newly alcoholics over the threshold. And you're right. If they come in and they can just kind of sit around and attend meetings and not really get involved, you can almost think about not drinking is just enough. And that happens with many people in different conditions, where if they're going to a safe place and they're not really doing the work, they can feel safe. But then if something happens, they fall apart and they're back again. Now, just in regard to the AA program, it has been developed into 14 different programs. So there's one for drugs, one for alcohol, one for gambling, one for so on. They're all based on the AA program. And that's what I want to get across to the audience. This program can be used for other conditions. So you may not be an alcoholic, but listen to what John has to say about if you decide to use a 12-step as a program for you, for your condition, don't hold back. Don't be cagey or nervous or going to wait what's going to look like in 6 months' time. Jump right in with 2 feet. And as John would take a member through the AA program, do the same thing with your condition. Just jump right in and soak up every single part of it and get involved and changing your ways and so on. And John, again, imagine you're talking about an alcoholic. How would you go about getting them over the threshold?
Well, thanks, Richard. The thing is, I really like to focus on the idea that it's very easy to have the illusion that you're in recovery just because you stopped drinking and started going to meetings. And the reason that illusion is so powerful is because when you stop drinking and start going to meetings, you're learning the lingo and you're going to meetings. That is so different from your drinking career that you may waste your desperation. You may waste your most powerful motivation. You could waste it and not utilize it. Nobody comes in to recovery on they don't just slide right in on the wings of victory. Virtually everybody comes in with some degree of desperation, a nudge from a judge or some type of the court of your family, the court at work, the judge. Somehow you get to recovery with some motivation. I encourage the newcomer to take that and run with it. Now, there are slogans that you could hear that may lead you astray. There's nothing wrong with the slogan, but if you believe the slogan, just don't drink and go to meetings, if you believe that, you might fall into the assumption that's all you need to do. However, that won't get you a good start. And it's a good start that makes the difference. So with my program that I published, it's digestible. Even for 2 newcomers could grab the book. You could get an ebook. You could get a paperback. You can grab the book and jump right in. It's not esoteric. It's not difficult to understand. I have led these one-day workshops for so many years and seen the work in action that I developed it into a way that the newcomer can embrace it and have an experience of step taking that is so vital. That experience of step taking, it's so different from an academic understanding that it works really well.
Thank you. To my audience, again, I'm talking to you guys who suffer with trauma, mood disorder, so on. You're not alcoholic, but again, maybe the AA books and the NA books and the GA books talk so much about the addiction, like, the alcohol or the drugs, that might be putting off for you. But John's book sounds to be the kind of book that you could get your teeth into, you could more aligned with what you're suffering, and then do that work to get over the threshold. It's just getting over the threshold. It's all about habits. If we have a bad habit of always telling people our bad stories and poor me and I'm a victim, and we go with that all the time, nothing changes. Other people might identify with us and might feel good in our victimhood, but we're not getting better. So you learn some ways of just not talking about your victimhood anymore and getting into saying, okay, I was a victim up until yesterday. Today, I'm not a victim. Today, I'm in recovery. This means I don't keep talking about my victimhood. Now I talk about changing, and you follow the directions in John's book, and you do what's suggested. And suddenly you find yourself a day later, you're no longer going around moping and blaming the world and feeling a victim. And suddenly you're becoming a strong kind of independent. I like to describe it as the strong silent type. This isn't rocket science. I was speaking to John before we started. We are in the perfect place right here and right now in their lives. We are between the past, which is over, and the future that may never happen. All we have are these 24 hours. And we can make a decision to focus on embracing John's work in these 24 hours. Decide you're going to do a one-day workshop. And again, if John can get this book and do it yourself, well, then maybe one of your recovery buddies sit down together and do this one-day workshop of John's to get over the threshold into recovery. To understand that you don't have to remain in the condition of mental illness. You can step out of that and take responsibility for your life and embrace life and live life one day at a time. No need to be better or worse than anybody else. It's okay to have a bad day. Just you do the best you can one day at a time. John.
Yes.
Anything you'd like to share on that?
Well, I would like to say that, thank you for this opportunity again. But there's one sentence in the AA literature that I believe clarifies the big picture. It's the one sentence that is the most succinct way to describe the 12 steps. And it's in the foreword to the 12 and 12, the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. And it goes like this. The 12 steps are a set of principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. Now, that single paragraph it's powerful because it not only tells you what the 12 steps are, but it gives you the insight on how to take advantage of the timeless wisdom. It says practicing the 12 principles as a way of life. So I believe that if you're into recovery, if you're recovering from alcoholism or addiction of some type, that you can ask yourself, am I living in the problem or am I living in the answer? And because if you're catastrophizing and suffering about what's going on in your life, that things aren't working out, that you've got troubles with finances and romances and all kinds of things, if you're there living in the problem, clearly not in the answer. Now, a lot of people might be scared of delving into the 12 steps. But if you're an addict, if you're in addiction, if you're an alcoholic, you're so fortunate to have a 12-step process that's designed exactly for you that will enable you to heal and rise above your past. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you, John. My own program is developed off the 12 steps of AA. It's a 12-step program for trauma recovery anonymous. And the idea is that not so much replace the word alcohol with trauma, because there's been many people have tried to create 12-step programs before where they've replaced the word alcohol with trauma and it hasn't worked. And you can easily see why. It's not a case of burying your head in the sand and pretend it didn't happen. We have to acknowledge it did happen, but then find a way of giving it away. And so we get to understand that the person I am today and the person who suffered the trauma in my childhood, a 12-year-old child, were two completely different people. And so when we do the 12-step program, my program, we're trying to steer away from, because it's on trauma, we don't talk about trauma, we don't talk about alcohol, we talk about change, trying to change who you are from your old thinking and feeling. And I think very much your book, your one-day workshop, is getting people to get out of their old thinking into new thinking. So it works for alcoholics, it works for, there's GA for gamblers, there's NA for drug addicts, there's OA for overeaters. The 12-step program has been used in 14 different modalities to deal with 14 different types of dysfunctional behaviors. So although John's program focuses squarely on alcohol for the AA members and for getting the early comers over the line, I do believe that John's program could be used for your condition. John, go ahead.
Well, yeah, my book is a workbook. It is very much about getting into action. It runs you through the 12 steps and a few of the most important parts of AA literature. But primarily, it's a set of prompts. It asks you questions. It gets you into, it takes 12 sheets of paper to do this. There's 12 sheets of paper because there's 12 specific exercises that you engage in. It's about a 4.5-hour process. It could be broken into days, but I encourage people to get a sharing partner and to engage in the process to get yourself a place where you won't be distracted. Because if you have the motivation right now that you want to recover from alcoholism or addiction, then getting into the process in an expedited fashion is going to give you an experience that you'll never get in a discussion meeting. You won't get it from reading. It only comes through doing. Now, my experience says that a lot can happen in a day, a tremendous amount, perspectives, awakenings, insights, and understandings that you can get only through doing. I've seen it happen. There's nothing more exciting for me than to see the lights come on in a person where they go, oh, I get it. Now I got a piece of this I didn't have before. Because until we're doing, I don't think there's a level of experience that really builds on the program. Yeah.
To follow through on that concept of doing, science tells us that bad habits have to be undone. So if you've been in your condition, whatever that is, for weeks, months, years, or God forgive me, decades, you've been dealing with life in a dysfunctional way for maybe years. And you can't just do like John's workbook one time and then walk away. You need to repeat this work day in, day out, maybe before you go to bed at night time, so you have a clear head, a good night's sleep, on awakening, on your lunch break, maybe on your commute to work, on your commute back from work, maybe on your morning break, on your afternoon break. They say you have to replace a bad habit with a new habit every 66 times. You have to repeat that to get us over the line. So again, you may have to do John's book 66 times in the first 10 or 12 days, just to get that sense of this new way of dealing with life, a new way of looking at life, a new attitude, outlook, perspective, with new honesty, open mind, and willingness. But it's a case of you have to change. You can't just do it one time and then think it's all okay. It maybe took you 20, 30 years to get as crazy as you are today. It may take you 20, 30 years to get as uncrazy as you would like to be. And so work like John's or my own program, you're going to have to tackle this and do this, I would think, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. You're not doing it for me. You're not doing it for John. You're doing it for yourself. And to get this, to get you over the threshold and to get into a new way of living, you'll have to really invest yourself into the doing, and doing this again and again, and just drumming it into your mind, into your heart, into your soul, that you look at life differently, that you deal with life differently. Understand that people act out. We're all selfish by our nature. So if someone acts out, you're not the target. They're not out to get you. You're collateral damage. They're acting out. And the fact that it affects you, you weren't the target. They're acting out. So you learn self-restraint. You learn not to react to other people's behavior. You just kind of go, there for the grace of God, there for the grace of God, go I, or let go, let God, or they're having a bad day. You learn to not react to your family, to your partner, to your boss when someone gives out to you or whatever, or finds fault and you're not in the wrong, but they're picking out on you. You let them express themselves. They can go back and apologize to you later. But you learn by just doing, of changing your way of life, of stop being a victim, of understand it's not about you, and just try and living one day at a time. And I think John's book is a fantastic idea of having a design for living. But you need to practice this as many times in a day. How many times would they need to practice your program, John, in a day, would you think, in the beginning?
Well, Richard, I believe that the 12 steps are a lifelong process.
Great.
My focus has been helping the newly sober to get a good start. In other words, ingest in short order, in a short time frame, ingest the bulk of the 12-step process. Get an understanding by doing of what the 12 steps are about. That can happen very quickly, and the process goes on for a lifetime. However, if you're in the stands and not out on the field and not engaged in action, the depth of your understanding about the recovery process can be extremely limited. There's too much hits you I think recovery hits you in it can be a deceptive input if you're newly sober, you start going to meetings and you have this there's a new language. You're meeting new people. There's a lot going on for you, but it's not like a meeting program. The 12 steps are not a meeting program. They are a 12-step program. And it's way too easy for a newcomer to fall into that. I'm going to meetings, so I'm in recovery. That is the reason that we're losing thousands every month who try recovery. But is that really taking the steps? That's my perspective. That's what I've learned over the years.
Thank you. I have to say, John, there was a time when I didn't give the 12 steps a chance in my early recovery. And I got very depressed and I got treated for depression. And like that, it's like going to meetings. I would go to see my therapist and my doctor, get my medication, and I do nothing on my own outside. It would be a case of every week I'd go and I get to bitch and moan at my doctor and my therapist, get my medication. And it was like that, going to meetings, but not doing the work. And it got to a stage where I remember, I'll never forget this. I'm in my hometown and I'm walking on the road. And there's a woman on the road. She's an immigrant and she's got a baby in her arms and she's begging for money. And I'm on my medication, so I'm basically not like a walking dead zombie kind of thing. I'm walking back to work. And she's putting my trousers to give her some money to feed her baby. And I shrug her off like, I couldn't be bothered, and I walked away. And that evening when the medication wore off, I was shocked about my lack of empathy and concern for a woman with a baby looking begging for money. I was just shocked that my allowing myself to be controlled by the medication in such a way robbed me of my ability to be a human. And so I remember my doctor told me, no, you can't come off with cold turkey. You've got to, he meant you got to peter down, but I just decided I'm going cold turkey. And I took 2 weeks off work and I went into my room and I lay in my bed for 2 weeks and basically, cold turkey, screaming, going crazy, coming off the meds. Wouldn't advise it to anybody. And after about 2 weeks, I was off the drugs and I was destroyed, And I went back to my doctor and he said to me, "You dirty looking Asia." I meant you could come off it gradually, but not, in one fell swoop. And at that time, I went into AA and I found a sponsor. And my first sponsor took me through the 12 steps in 4 sessions. But I knew I had to do the steps now, not over 6 months or a year, because I knew if I left it for a long time with a sponsor who would do it slowly, I'd go back to my thing of just staying in the process without doing the work. And so I got this old timer to take me to the 12 steps, and he just wasn't taking the first 3 steps we did in about 2.5 minutes. I'll never forget, as long as I live. And afterwards, I felt like $1 million. He gave me things to do. I did those things. I slept like a log. No nightmares, no flashbacks. It was the most wonderful experience ever. The next day we did steps 4 to 9. And then the next day was 10. It was the most beautiful thing to do the 12 steps in that way. And it felt really fantastic. So 4 to 6, 4 to 7. And then 8 to 9 was the third one. But again, it was really cool doing it now. It's 38 years ago. And I didn't drink since then. But I had to get into the action. That was the big thing, was I didn't want to treat my addiction like I did with the depression. I didn't want to be just living in the medication, living in the therapy. I wanted to be participating in life during the day, So I needed something like what you're talking about. I love the idea of this 1-day program or 2-day program or 3-day program, just doing the work today, not putting it off, not taking a while. I go to meetings, I hear people talking about, you're in the door now, take your time, and we can do the first step over the first 2 months. I'm kind of putting my hair out thinking, that person could drink again. Like, are you stupid? They could go crazy. Do the 12 steps today, or today and tomorrow or whatever. So again, it's great hearing you talk about the doing is the big part of this. Taking the action to do. We get dependent on therapists, and they're going to make decisions for us, and they're going to kind of direct us in their thinking. Whereas when you do a 12-step program, you're taking responsibility for your life. I'm taking responsibility for my life. If I make mistakes, if I make errors, I learn from my mistakes and I get better. But I don't wait for my mommy or my daddy to fix me, or my therapist to fix me, or someone else to do the job for me. I may have a sponsor who's directing me, but they're not doing the work for me. I have to do the work myself.
Exactly. There's a question, I think, that can often bring the newly sober into focus. And that question is, what are you doing in your recovery other than going to meetings? Because that question can bring clarity and let you know if you're in the stands or on the field. I mean, you may have a sponsor. If you don't have a sponsor, what's stopping you? Right? Our instinctual fears can stop us from doing the very things that are good for us to do. And that asking, what comes up for you when it's like, okay, if you don't have a sponsor, and what's stopping you from having a sponsor? What's stopping you? Now, if you don't have one, you can simply go to a meeting and listen for someone who looks happy and sounds like they know what they're talking about. Ask them to work with you. I mean, it's not difficult. It's not a lifelong commitment to have a sponsor, but it's a step in the right direction. It's taking some action. It's letting yourself know that you're valuable. Your life is valuable, and your life is at risk, because nobody does recovery alone. They just don't do it. Nobody gets sober by themselves. It is a we program. And yeah.
I think in every 12-step program, it is a we program. It's a fantastic point to make. You're not alone. Please understand that you're not alone. In my own program, I talk about the fact that the first step is that we are the problem, that our thinking is wrong. We're stuck with what they call stinking thinking and faulty feelings. We start trusting our feelings and our thinking, and we think everyone's talking about us and no one likes us, and our feelings are real. And if we feel depressed or anxious, that's okay, that's the way we are. And we get stuck in that area. And understand, we can't trust our thinking or our feelings. I like to tell people that we've got 2 sets of voices. We've got the voices of the mind, the conscious mind, the ego, this fallen world. Their job is to keep you in conflict with yourself, the world around you, and to stop you from ever having and forming a relationship with God. And then the voice you're meant to listen to is the voice of your subconscious mind. That's the kingdom of God within you. That's the one that tells you when you're sensing any danger, real or imaginary. It might be imaginary. You might watch the movie Jaws or something, and you get this fright or panic. You have to take one of 6 actions. You have to fight, flight, freeze, fawn, faith, or acceptance.
Yeah.
And that's the idea behind it. Take some form of action. You're listening to God. Stay in the feeling and wallow in the feeling and fear the feeling. You're listening to the voices in your head, and you're going to really destroy yourself. So that's one of the things I'll say to you is stop listening to the voice in your head and ask God and trust your instincts and take some action. The second thing I'd love to say to you, if I may, at this point is, again, John is an AA advocate, a recovery coach. So all his talk is about AA and alcohol. And I get that. And I know he's talking about alcohol. And although I'm a trauma coach and talking about trauma, fit John's program to your condition. Don't think because John is only talking about alcohol that his program can only be used for alcohol. The AA program can be used for 14 different conditions, including trauma. So I would just make a decision that if John's program is based on the AA program, and the AA program can be used for 14 different conditions like drugs, trauma, gambling, overeating, and so on, codependency. Well, there's no reason why John's program can't be used for trauma. That John, as a recovery coach, has to talk about alcohol and basically alcohol alone. But don't let that deter you from getting his book and using his program and doing all those prompts and those work to help you to see how you can change your life for you. I've worked with people who've been in therapy forever, and I saw recently an article by the mental health industry, which shocked me. I remember about 2 months ago, I was considering that in most industries there is a kind of a room for margin for error of about 5%. Okay, and with 1 billion people diagnosed with mental disorders, that's about 50 million people. I'm thinking that's a huge number of people who could be misdiagnosed. And then I'm doing my prayers at night, and something tells me, go onto the internet in the morning and check out and see how many people actually are misdiagnosed. So I go do a search and I put down for how many people in the world have been misdiagnosed with mental disorders. And then it comes up that there's a study in the mental industry held in the National Library of Medicine in North America that says that 39% of all people diagnosed with mental disorders were misdiagnosed. That's 4 in every 10 people. That's 390 million people out of 1 billion people have been misdiagnosed. So there's a very good chance you're being treated for something you don't have. And so if that's the case and you find you've been in therapy for multiple years, and if it turns out what you've been treated for today is not what you've been treated for at the beginning, chances are you might be one of those who are misdiagnosed. And the idea of getting John Merkel's work program and doing it would be phenomenal. And even my trauma program and doing that, because maybe you don't have a mental illness, maybe you have a hole in your soul, you have a broken spirit, and you need to heal your spirit within. So I think John's book would be a fantastic benefit for you. Or maybe you might look at my own Trauma Recovery Anonymous program. But be willing to find out, speak to your therapist about whether you actually have a mental disorder or not, and then be willing to look at something like John's program to find a new way where you can self-heal. John, it's been great having you on. I'm going to make certain that when I'm posting your conversation, I'll include all your information, your details, your website, your contact details, and also your book, all the details for wherever it can be bought on Amazon or wherever it is. I'll include that in the presentation. And before we finish the conversation, are there 3 things you could share? I'm trying to ask my clients or my guests if they could share three tools, 3 coping skills, 3 ideas they can share with the audience to help them get into recovery.
I'd be happy to do that. And thank you, Richard. Yes, I would say if there was 3 things, number 1 is don't delay. If you're in addiction, the delay is so dangerous. And I'm talking specifically about the delay in taking the steps. So there's a culture inside of AA, and I think AA is the greatest thing on the planet. It's probably in NA and everywhere else. But there's a culture in where the calendar is overemphasized. I've got 90 days. I'm working on 6 months. I can't wait to get 5 years. There's nothing significant, powerful going to happen just because of the passage of time. That illusion, like one of the things I would say is don't wait. The illusion that you're going to get better by just parking yourself into a program as a spectator, don't let that get you. And because of my experience, I would want to point out that it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen alone. You don't have to have a sponsor with 30 years of recovery. You need another willing partner. You need someone who is committed to recovery. That's what's important. You can jump into the process like with a book like mine. Now, if you don't have a guide like that, you could still sit and read the doctor's opinion with a new person that you met at a meeting and say, hey, would you go out to the picnic table and read the doctor's opinion with me? Things will happen between two people. And then whatever you learn, practice it. This is the third thing. Whatever you learn in that doing and sharing with another person, take and share that with someone else as fast as possible. That's what I've got. It's been wonderful to meet you, Richard, and an honor to be on your show.
John, it was absolutely fantastic. A wealth of information and wisdom and knowledge and expertise. It's wonderful. I love meeting people who really emphasize doing the steps. So again, John's an advocate for AA. I'm an advocate for AA, GA, and also for trauma. So if you have any trauma or mood disorder, try looking at these 12 steps, whether it's the AA program or the NA or my own trauma recovery anonymous program. Try looking at these 12 steps and John's book and just do the work and see what happens. I mean, again, it may cost you $20 to buy a book. What's your book selling for, John?
Yeah, it's $20, although you can get the ebook. If you're part of the Amazon program, heck, it's free, but it's $10 for the ebook. You can. So you get So you get John's book. Again, we're paying for therapy. I think you're going to therapy, you're seeing a therapist. I don't know how long you've been in therapy for, but for me, I was depression for 3 years, seeing a therapist every week for 3 years, paying $30 for a session. I wasn't social welfare, it was out of my own pocket. And I'm thinking, if I had a book that would just, I could buy 20 quid and have it in my house, and I could look at it anytime I want to put a highlighter and a pen and pencil and just take notes and do something, I'd kind of feel I'd be independent and self-healing rather than always going to someone and getting their permission or their approval or whatever, or them to make decisions for me. There's a sense of having my own program in my house would be really cool. So John's book, I think, would be fantastic for yourself. My own book, I've got to always plug. It's a Trauma Recovery Anonymous program. Now, it's 2 parts. The healing event is €30, but that's the actual 2-hour event to get rid of all your demons forever. And then the 12-step program is about €14, and that's for the 12-step program. Again, if you do the 12 steps with me, I will be charging you for the healing event and for the 12-step program, and I'll be charging you for taking you through the process. But once you've gone through the process, I will take you to the 12 steps over 12 days or 12 weeks for free. There's no charge when you're doing the 12 steps with a member. That is always free. It's one member helping another. So again, when we've done this healing event and it's out of the way, and you want assistance of me to do the 12 steps with you, 12 steps 12 times a week, or 12 times over 12 days, 12 times over 12 weeks, I will do that gladly for you. Okay, there's no problem with that. And we have a small group. At the moment, there's only 2 of us, but we're going to build up. It happened with Bill and Bob. There's only 2 of them in the beginning, and then they suddenly had a couple of million AA members. I'm quite certain that Trauma Recovery Anonymous will take off as well. So again, consider the idea of, even though you have a therapist and you probably have a great relationship with them, but if you've been in therapy forever and there's no change, just maybe John Merkel's book is the missing link. Just maybe he can get you over the corner into believing and understanding that you're not broken, you're not crazy. I always think that someone who suffers a trauma, surely it's the person who performed the trauma are the ones who are mentally ill, not the person who suffered it, the victim or the survivor. And if you're the victim or the survivor, so your younger aspect of you who suffered it, so for me as a 12-year-old child 50 years ago, he was the victim. Today I'm the survivor. I can't be mentally ill if I'm the victim or the survivor. It has to be the other person who caused the pain. So I don't think you're mentally ill. I think maybe you have a spiritual
sickness, you have a hole in your soul eating away at you. And I think a book like John Merkel's would really help you to heal that hole in your soul. And maybe from John's book, then you come onto my program and you do the healing event and you start the 12-step program. And before you know it, you have a life where you're back living in the present moment. So John, thank you very much for coming on. My audience, please thank you for listening to me. I'm talking too much. I'm going to shut up now and say good night to you all. Good night.
Thank you, Richard.